Here.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Excused, sorry.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Lawley,
Excused.
Representative Singh,
Here.
Representative Strzok,
Here.
Representative Williams, Chairman Andrew.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Senate File 109 is now on the table for our consideration. Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be before you guys again today with Senate File 109. I'm Senator Brennan. This is open enrollment within school districts in Wyoming. And this bill was brought about because we know that choice is a big thing and parents want choice for their students. Within our school districts, some school districts have some great policy for kids being able to go to the school within their district, the public school within their district that has good choice. Other school districts are a little bit more difficult in that open enrollment process, and in fact, argue that there isn't any. So if you'll turn to page 2 of this bill, what we're trying to do is create open enrollment within our schools so that within the public school, parents and students can have choice. We would go in and annually the department's website would have information that would be provided by the school district's board of trustees on this their open enrollment policy. Starting then on page 2, what we're doing is we're asking each public school board of trustees to adopt policies and procedures allowing any pupil to enroll in any public school within the pupil's resident school district. The pupils would apply in their resident school district. There are a few provisions or things that we've made. If you go over to page 3, we would give priority to school attendance areas, pupils participating in a school-based education program, and to pupils who have siblings already currently enrolled in that public school. Then we go on to state that any parent or guardian aggrieved by a decision of the school district under this paragraph can seek review in accordance with the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act. We are asking school districts to do this in 26 is when we have this go into effect, because this is a big policy thing and we want to give school districts time to get these policies in place. And we ask them to do those policies. We define what resident school district means. Then we go over to page 4. We define a school attendance area. We provide that the board of trustees of each school district may decline to enroll a pupil in the public school within the pupil's resident school district. And we provide the reasons for that, which would be that the public school does not have sufficient capacity at the appropriate grade level as determined by the school district. The pupil has been suspended or expelled. And then we have in section E, in implementing this provision of section C of this section, no school district board of trustees shall be required to establish and offer any particular programs in a public school, or if the program is not currently offered in the school, no school district shall be required to provide transportation to a student who enrolls at a school pursuant to the rights provided by this section and Wyoming statutes 21-3-10-A I'm not really sure what that Romanet is off the top of my head. When the students would not otherwise be provided transportation. So basically, if they wouldn't normally be provided transportation, the school district doesn't have to change their transportation policy or the way that they're doing transportation just based on this bill. And then the board of trustees of each school district, we ask them to publish the number of vacancies open for enrollment in the grade levels in their schools. Then finally on page 5, we just list the reasons why kids could not be denied the right to attend a public school. We add socioeconomic status, ethnicity, disability, and then residential address. That residential address is important so that no child has to go to a school based on their zip code. And then this becomes effective, like I said, July 1st, 2026. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at page 4, paragraph E, lines 19 through 22, no school board of trustees shall be required to establish and offer any particular program in a public school if the program is not currently offered in the school. How might this affect students with special needs or IEPs whose parents would like them to go to a different school, but that school might not have exactly the type of program they need?
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kelly, if I'm understanding your question correct, this doesn't affect schools with certain special needs or IEP programs. This language is in there because sometimes there might be, like, when we talk about dual language schools or schools that have different other programs, some districts have different schools that provide different programs and other school districts don't have that. And so this just says that if your school district doesn't have like a dual language school or some sort of specialty school like that, that the student does not, you don't have to create that school within your district. It would be up to the parents if they had a special needs child, they want them to move them to another district. That would be up to the parents where they want that child to go, whether it be the one that has the services or if they'd better be met in the other school.
Further questions? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell us why this, some of the districts, this isn't working as well with others and the need to bring this bill? I feel like in my particular neck of the woods, my county, it works pretty well, but I'd like to hear more about why this might be needed statewide. Thank you.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bratton, great question. So again, I'll go back to just this, that open enrollment within schools is something that parents are looking for. That they're looking for school choice, not just outside of the public school systems, but within the public school systems. So this bill, there are some districts that do this great. Natrona County has an incredible open enrollment system. And they were actually very helpful in with this bill and looking at that. There's other school districts that do not, and the kids are very much stuck going to a school based on their zip code and where they live. And down here in, this isn't just Laramie County, but because I know it the best, down here in our district, we had to pass special legislation a couple years ago just to get kids that were military kids who were being bullied. We had to pass legislation so that just even those kids could be transferred to a school that was safer. And we did that for military kids. What we're aiming to do in this bill is have open enrollment for all kids so that they're not told, and they're not, even with these requests of transferring to different schools, they're denied within some of the school districts and told, no, you can't transfer even when there's a place that is. So we're really aiming to open up with this bill, the public schools, to that same type of school choice that we're seeking to do outside of the public school system.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. The department, I thought they were here. Oh, no, there she is. Ms. Maloney.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the House. My name is Wanda Maloney, and I am here on behalf of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. The superintendent stands in favor of this bill. She herself was a product of Natrona County School District and was successful growing up in that community and would further like to support school choice for all students in the state. I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No questions. Thank you. We will now open public testimony. I think we will provide 10 minutes in opposition and 10 minutes in support. Would anyone like to speak in opposition to the bill to start with?
Mr. Chair, members of the
Afternoon.
committee, my name's Dave Bartlett. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Campbell County School District. And I also did spend extensive amount of time here in Laramie One in the same role. Just some things that I'd like to speak on this. In general, I do see this as a local control issue based on local needs. I believe that school boards and school administrators are well aware of their community needs and are able to adjust for those needs. The question of open enrollment or attendance boundaries, we talk about Natrona County being open enrollment, being very successful, but I would ask you, if a school is full, is it still open enrollment? And so oftentimes in those communities, because we're allowed in, we're allowed to stay year after year. You may have students within an area that do not have access to that school, therefore, or are forced to be bused elsewhere. When we talk about the definition of capacity, what definition will we use? Will it be restricted capacity, which is what the State Facilities Commission uses, 16-1, or are we going to base it on staffing? There are times where we begin the year, we staff for the student enrollment in the building. If we have a large influx shortly after, we're going to have an issue. We're not going to have teachers. In the secondaries, when we look at what is capacity, that's a very difficult thing to speak of. If you think about Algebra 1, all of our freshmen take Algebra 1. We have sophomores and juniors that are repeating it. So it's not uncommon that you may have a classroom of 25 to 30 students. We go to the other end of the spectrum and we've got a calculus or a pre-calculus class, we may have 8 or 10. So how is it that an administrator is going to be able to staff or indicate whether we are full capacity or not? Because really that schedule is very fluid in a secondary school. When we talk about publishing our open seats every 12 weeks, what I would tell you is when you look at the beginning of the school year, when we register our students, we do that over the summer, and we have an expectation of how to staff that building. Oftentimes, we have parents move over the summer that don't allow us, let us know. Therefore, we have, and what we use for our capacity numbers would be that 10-day drop. So we have to keep all of those students in our roles for the first 10 days of school. We've staffed for having those students there, and yet we may then publish that I'm full, when indeed I may have some openings. So I do believe that in allowing the school districts their current methodologies and being able to address that, I think we're in a better place. I would tell you in Laramie One, and I can tell you in Campbell County, they have exceptions. They have opportunities for students to get into those schools and be accepted if they're not overcrowded. So, Mr. Chairman of the committee, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand and appreciate the issue of local control. Considering other districts have successfully implemented this, what is the downside to a district to have the mandate to have this available to students? And what is the harm to the district?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Representative Kelly, so oftentimes we have students that come and go multiple times throughout a year. Some of it may be based on socioeconomics, could be, parents moving because they can't afford rent, those types of things. And that becomes a real issue. Sometimes you may have a student that, or a parent that chooses to lose or to move multiple times in a year. Having been part of a district that we actually researched those moves in mid-year, we looked at the impact on achievement. We found that anytime a student was forced to relocate during the middle of the year, they lost upwards to a year of academic growth. In many of our Title I neighborhoods, transient population, a very fluid enrollment can be an issue. We actually, in our district, we try to keep those kids in their own neighborhood or in that initial school, and we will try and bus them. So again, I think that you've got to take each case on a case-by-case basis. If it's a case of bullying, then the district should work with the parents, help address that. It could be a case where a student wants to be on a winning football team. And we move mid-year, are we going to lose eligibility? So there's a lot of things, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and I just feel like that the districts, working with the families, can help to mitigate a lot of those things.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there precedence for this? Has there been something in Natrona County with people like switching schools to bolster a football team? Has it actually happened, or is that just a hypothetical?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Representative Kelly, I wouldn't say Natrona alone. As I said, I've been in the other two large districts, and yes, it may be a situation where a student wants to move schools to be on a different athletic program. I wouldn't say just football teams, but it does happen.
Further questions? Representative Bratton.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, does Wyoming have laws that restrict transfer for athletics?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I don't know that either. If there's anybody who
Anyone at the
would like to
desk
speak to
has
that, I would
knowledge
be
of
very
that.
interested.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of School Administrators. To answer the last question, Representative Bratton, the Wyoming High School Activities Association is in charge of that. But there are times whenever people can figure out ways around that. I've even been in districts where students have moved to a different attendance area to be able to attend a school, or have said that they want to go to a program. So an example of that would be the ROTC programs here in Laramie. One, if you wanted to go to a specific one, you'd have to go to a specific high school. So you could claim that as why you would go, which would allow you to go and play on that sports team if you wanted to. So there's different ways that people work to get around those. Again, and I think, again, it's difficult within each district, especially depending on the district that you're in. Probably our larger districts are more urban areas are a little different than our rural areas. Excuse me. If you start looking at Crook, you've got Hewlett, Moorcroft, and Sundance, which are all quite a bit farther apart. So opening up transfers within that district is a lot different than being in one of the larger urban areas.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown? You got off pretty easy. Would you like to make another comment?
Well, I was just answering that question. I have a little more testimony, if that would be okay, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
So again, Boyd Brown, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of School Administrators. Again, I think it's very difficult to try to regulate this from the state level. I know that even in Casper, students do not always get their first choice. Sometimes their second choice. It's the same anywhere else. I've been in two of the larger districts and the largest district in the state. We frequently have to move kids to other areas because kids don't grow up geographically age appropriately so that we can have the right number in each school. So we have students that are transferred to other schools. We bus them there. We try to keep them in the schools as long as we can for a year, give them that opportunity at the year to go back to a school if there's an opportunity there. I don't think that there's any school district out there that is trying to not work with students the way that they can, but I do believe that we try to honor the students that want to be in their neighborhood schools. I believe that Natrona County tries to honor as many as they can in first choices. But again, it's a much more difficult puzzle than you would think it is, trying to get the appropriate number of kids into each one of those schools. So there are times when we take a lot of kids into a school if there's a grade level or a program that doesn't have enough students. So it's not as simple as it would seem, and I would just say I think that each one of the districts will do the best job that they can with that. With that, I'd answer any other questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown? Go ahead. Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I guess my big question would be, it sounds like you're able to, if these kids have a really good reason to move to a different school, like I was just thinking FFA, some schools have ag classes and some don't. So you're able to work with these students anyway. There's programs set up in each school to accommodate this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Madam Chair, Representative Stock, depending on the district, that's very true. It would depend on the how far that they might have to travel. So yes, in different schools, I would say, help me out with this, Dave. I'm going to phone a friend because he'll know better than I do. The automotive program for working on the outside of cars is at Central. And if you want to go to that program, so can you help me out a little bit there, Dave? I'll let you talk a little bit about the programs down here in Laramie as to how they try to work through all those.
So in Laramie County, each of the 3 high schools have programs that are unique, which then will allow students to, through those programs, go. Auto body is at Central, auto mechanics is at South. Central and East each have a unique ROTC program, somewhat Air Force, somewhat Army. So they do have those situations where students can enroll and go. And then in addition to that, they do have a waiver system that they can go through the central office and get approved to go to the other school if need be.
So that's a long answer to they try to do the best that they can. And again, it depends on the distance between the schools at different times.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I guess my thing, what, if this bill was to pass, what harm would it, what is the negative effects on your school systems here?
Madam Chair, Representative Stock, I think that there have been some really good things thought out about this. I think the idea that you don't have to transport was one that we were very concerned about that might increase educational spending quite a bit. I think the other is how do we keep students educationally involved and engaged if they're traveling over 30, 40 miles during the school day to go to a different school in their district to be able to get those. So I think just losing some academic time would be the biggest concern that we would have that we'd be forced to do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All right, guys, thank you. Got
Thank
off
you.
pretty good there. Thank you. Anyone else here for Senate File 109? I do notice someone that it was signed up for online, but actually in the room. Maybe he's approaching, Mr. Downing, no? Hi, good to see you. Welcome to House Education Committee.
And members of the committee, my name is Rochelle Ingen with Americans for Prosperity. AFP is in support of this legislation. We firmly believe all students should have access to the education environment that best serves their unique needs. The current status quo of residentially assigning students to a school is archaic, dating back to the 19th century. At AFP, we believe public schools should truly be public, meaning open to all students no matter where they reside. Finally, public support for open enrollment is incredibly high. Recent polling from YouGov finds that over 73% of people support open enrollment and the freedom of students to attend the public school of their choice. I stand by for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? You got off really easy today, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Any other public testimony? All right, we're going to close public testimony, and committee, what is your pleasure concerning the bill? All right.
And I'll second it.
All right. Bill was moved by Representative Singh, seconded by Representative Strzok. So committee, do you have any, you can see that if you've got the engrossed version, which I assume you all do, the Senate did some things and a few things. And you want to come up here while we work the bill? That way you can give us some input if we need it. Thank you, Senator Brennan. Thank you for bringing the bill. Anybody have any amendments they'd want to propose? No? Okay. All right. Yes, yes, sir, Representative McKay, or Erickson.
Either one. Question, and maybe I missed this, but I think it's important. Was there an amendment to limit the number of moves during a year, or was that just in testimony?
Senator Brennan.
Madam Chairman, Representative Erickson, no, I think there was just testimony that some kids move within the year. This is really aimed at an open enrollment at that beginning of the school year. And I would suspect that if we have kids in the right school for them at the beginning of the school year, that would actually, those movements within the school year would take care of themselves.
Follow up? Okay. Any further questions? All right. I'm kind of sensing that maybe you guys are ready to vote on this bill. And wanting a call for the question is what I'm asking. Thank you. You guys are really catching on here. Thank you. No. Well, all right, Ashley, we are voting on Senate File 109. Please call the roll.
Absolutely. So on Senate File 109, open enrollment within Wyoming school districts do pass. Representative Bratton,
Aye.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Strzok,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
No.
and Chairman Andrew has left an absentee vote of aye. So that is 8 aye and 1 no.
Thank you, Ashley. Senate File 109 has passed the Education Committee. There's several co-sponsors on here, including our good chairman. I will visit with him and we'll talk about it. I too am a co-sponsor. So thank you so much, Senator Brennan. Have a great day. All right, we're ready to move on to Senate Joint Resolution 1. And we will begin with, I don't know who's presenting that bill. I bet it's Senator Barlow who's approaching from far. Good afternoon, Senator Barlow. Good to see you.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, well, please walk us through your bill, the resolution, talk to us about it, and we're ready to listen.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to present the Senate Joint Resolution 1 to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I brought two constitutions with me, the United States Constitution and the Wyoming Constitution, not because I'm a constitutional scholar, but I think they do have bearing to what we're going to talk about today. And I want to start by saying that if, when we took our oath of office, I guess 6 weeks ago, we had tested that we would pay attention to those things. I've been doing this work, I've been fortunate to do this work in the legislature for several years now, and as I've gone on, I do my best to try to understand what the context of those constitutions is and how that's being applied. This bill has been a personal work of interest to me for my entire tenure in the legislature. So 13 years ago, when I came in the legislature, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about an Article 5?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. What article? Which article? Which magazine are we talking about?" So I literally had to start learning about Article 5. And that's what I bring this to you in that context is, on my own, I went to 4 different meetings, national meetings, over the next 3 to 4 years. 3.5 years,
all over to listen to folks both for and concerned with an Article 5. And that's how I came to believe in the process. Members of the committee, while this particular convention state has 3 particular calls in it, I know there are other calls out there. And I appreciate them and respect them because they are trying to access the same process which is laid out in Article 5 of the US Constitution. There's only 2 bodies that have the ability to amend the Constitution, to initiate that process. One of them is Congress, 2/3 of both houses, and one of them is the states, the legislatures of the several states. Again, 2/3 to actually initiate the application, and then the process ensues with a convention for amending the Constitution. So, Madam Chairman, quickly, I'll just go to through the joint resolution. And there may be folks in the room that want to talk to this, because none of them left, not very many left after the last bill, just saying.
Buttons on too.
So anyway, and some will be for, and some will have concerns, so, I respect that. The whereases, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, obviously, that just lays out kind of the thinking. Why is this important? This is a standard type of resolution that's been considered in 19 other states and adopted in 19 other states. I believe we're at 11 states right now that are considering it during this one. As you would know, 34 states is the bar for 2/3, and so we're getting closer to there. So line 6, empower state legislatures, as I mentioned, straight out of the U.S. Constitution. And then you can go through the rest of the whereases. But I think why is this? What are the purposes of this particular convention? Go to the bottom of page 2. Lines 21 through 22, onto the page 3. It's to impose fiscal restraints. The Wyoming Constitution, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, great to see you. The Wyoming Constitution has fiscal restraints within it. If you'll recall, and I can pull up it's 1% of the total assessed value of the state is the maximum the state could encumber as debt. 1%. Well, we don't have that same in the US Constitution. I haven't done the math, but I know, I'm pretty confident that our 34 trillion is outside 1% of our nation's assessed value. 1% again. So 1%, so fiscal constraints. I'm not saying that's what an amendment may come out as, but fiscal restraints. In Wyoming, we have that. Limitation of the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Next one. Basically, the federal state. How much influence should they have? I just came back I'm just coming here from a committee meeting where we have 3 bills that are pushing back on health issues, that a lot of them came through the federal government. There was a bill, 3 bills, anyway, my mind's not there right now. I left that meeting, but those 3 bills, a lot of that was limitations of other governments placing their impositions on us. And then the final one, Mr. Chairman, and going to the Madam Chairman left, Mr. Chairman is in the chair, is the terms of office of federal officials and members of Congress. Certainly, we can have the discussion about term limits. And let's be clear, it would take 34 applications and then a decision on what would be taken forth at a convention, and that would have to come out of a convention. So Section 2 is the process of laying out when you call, who can do that. Congress has no authority in this process except to call for the convention when it receives the requisite 2/3. They don't get to set the rules. They don't get to do any of that. That's up to the several states and how they are laid out. As you may know, several years ago, one of my good colleagues who was in the House at that time with me and now serves in the Senate, we amended the Wyoming statutes to lay out how that process works in Wyoming, how you select the people who are going to go take part in this, and how you recall them if they step out of bounds. How you say, that is outside of the scope of our charge to you as a state. It's time for you to come home. We'll send someone who can, and there's penalties within that. So continuing to walk through, like I said, there's a lot of folks here to talk, but I want to be clear. This is about us, I believe, doing the most fundamental thing, allowed as legislators, giving our constituents in the several states the ability to amend the U.S. Constitution. The process is laid out, 2/3 to get the application, 3/4 is the bar to ratify an amendment that would come out of this Constitution. What does that mean? Let's think about it in the opposite. 13 states of the current 50 could say, no, thank you. 13 states could say, we're not interested. So I know we're in a closely divided nation, some would say right now, between the colors of states, but I don't think we're not that far off balance. We're not 13 one way or the other. So I think there's quite a bit there. Now, a couple of safety measures in here. Let's go to the top of bottom of page 4 to the top of page 5. Some people will have concern about the Bill of Rights. Well, it's the First Amendment, Second Amendment, keep going down the list, the first 10. The way this reads is, it'll be out of order to consider those. And that would be a means for, if this state were to adopt this, and I hope we do, for us to recall a member who considered anything that was in that first 10, right? Second Amendment, no, it's off the table. We're not messing with that. And the state of Wyoming would say, come on home, delegate, that's what they're going to be doing there, we're not going to participate. And then, of course, the second thing, besides calling the convention, calling the convention, the second thing that the Congress can do, the only two things, is decide how the ratification process takes place. That's on page 5, ratified by the legislatures or by special ratification Congress, and those are also laid out currently in statute. And then, as I mentioned before, lines 13 through 16 of page 5, this talks about the instructions that we would give to delegate, Wyoming would give to delegates, and then obviously the penalties should they not, including come on home, you're out of line. We're not in that. And that's, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that's the resolution. Because of the time and because of the number of people that are interested, I'm going to keep it as brief as I can and be glad to stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Barlow for being here today. So this paragraph 5 in section 2, and that's at the bottom of page 4, goes on to the next page. Is that unique to Wyoming's legislation that we're considering here? Is that part of the other conventions in the other states?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is the same, if you're asking about whether the language that was passed in the other 19 states and being considered elsewhere, if this is unique to ours or all of them, my understanding, this is the identical language that's been passed in the other 19 states, consistent with what we believe as a republic. We are a republic, and that means every state gets one vote. So I think this is consistent with what's been already done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Senator. Page 2, at the bottom, 21 and 22, it says to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. This is a big question I have, because I'm wondering what amendment we can write that would actually do that, considering Amendment 10 already exists. My concern is that if court edicts can circumvent Amendment 10, which was clear as day, to limit the federal government, what rule can we pass that courts would not circumvent? Just maybe to illustrate it, sometimes people think it's good policy to put up a sign that says no firearms, and then people bring them in anyway, and they say, well, let's get a bigger sign. I'm afraid that we might just be asking for a larger sign, no government overreach. What do we have to actually ensure the government would, what's the enforcement mechanism they would abide by this new set of rules if they're not abiding by the current set of rules?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. So I guess I don't have a crystal ball to what the limitations, who we wanted to place limitations on. Let's say it's the power of taxation, which has already been dealt with in the Constitution. What if we wanted to go into one of those particular amendments and say, accept this or that? Then I think that may be a clear path. Now, if you're talking about the overreach of a particular agency, let's say that oversees public lands, then that might become more nuanced, because we don't have a clear path in the current Constitution to say, we like that, except it shouldn't count to this. So I can't prognosticate how a group of people with similar interests would come together and say, how do we implement this? Folks in the room, I'm sure, have ideas about that. But I guess what I believe is most important is this, is we open the avenue, the access to this process, and then we decide how to actually, if we're willing and able and ready to implement it. So, like I said, I don't have something that says, by golly, this is what I'd do if I were there. I think we have to actually first of all, open that avenue up and then go have those very constructive conversations, just like you 62 do on the floor. Well, what about this? The ideas start flowing, the juices start flowing, and you're coming from different places, all 50 states, recall, different issues, different, challenges, et cetera. And I think that there would be an opening up. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, just go a little further, that's what I found when I went to those 4 different meetings in Indianapolis, in Washington, D.C., in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, which was quite remarkable, actually, and then in Utah, which was still, they were all remarkable, but Independence Hall was quite remarkable, there were people from 30 to 40 states, and they just had all kinds of ideas. But what we were focused on is what's the mechanism to actually having those ideas heard and having a meaningful way to get them at least considered. And this was where we came, and this is what we were working toward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry I can't be more specific about something, but I think everything should be on the table, I guess is my point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. There are state agencies that would like to comment on the bill? Seeing none, we will open public comment. We could probably do 20 minutes in opposition and 20 minutes in support. So we'll start with opposition. If you're in opposition to the bill, please come forward and fill the chairs. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not currently a representative, though I appreciate the respect. My name is Jeanette Ward, and I am representing myself. Please vote no on Convention of the States. This is a bad idea because it threatens the very foundation of our republic. Supporters of the resolution are under the misconception that a convention would be limited to specific issues. They are wrong. James Madison, the father of our Constitution, refused to call for a second convention to incorporate the Bill of Rights. He said, absolutely not. It would be too risky to reconvene. He correctly perceived that another convention would open a can of worms. He insisted the Bill of Rights be added to the Constitution in appendix format. In 1988, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court Warren Burger agreed with James Madison when he said, there is no way to effectively limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. The convention could make its own rules and set its own agenda. Congress might try to limit the convention to one amendment or one issue, but there is no way to assure the convention would obey. A constitutional convention would shake the very foundation of our republic. While conservative states would likely use a convention to try to reduce federal authority, liberal states would almost certainly use it to go after the Second Amendment and the Electoral College. It is possible, even likely, that the ensuing disagreements could result in major civil unrest. A convention of the states should be avoided at all costs. If Wyoming legislators would like to change the Constitution, they should do so one amendment at a time. I implore you to vote no.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Iverson. I'm from Sheridan. I studied history and philosophy at Regis University and finally finished my degree at a Wyoming community college. The Convention of States, or an Article 5 convention, is a profoundly dangerous idea. And today I'm going to give you 3 reasons why. First of all, there's no rules to it. Second, you risk a runaway convention. And finally, that I've heard all of you argue against, we don't legislate on things that we don't know. The first question I have for you is, why is there a spittoon on the floor of the Wyoming House right now. Now, while you think about that, and I'll get back to it in just a minute, I'd like to talk about rules. Senator Barlow gave you lots of examples of how this thing is going to work. But I challenge you, representatives, show me where any of those rules are written down in any of our founding documents. You won't find it because it's not in the Federalist Papers, it's not in the Declaration of Independence, and there's only one spot in the Constitution, and it only lists two things that a convention of states can't do. And that is that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses of the ninth section of the first article, and that's all about slavery, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. Those are the only two things that an Article 5 convention can't do. Other than that, there's nothing written down about an Article 5 convention. This book's got all of our state documents in it, the Federalist Papers, anywhere, everything. And I implore you, if you think it's in there, go ahead and read it, because it's not. So let's get back to the spittoon real quick. The reason why there is a spittoon there is a rule that exists that says you can demand a spittoon. Now, there's a historical reason for it being there, but the main point is that it is there at all. The very first thing that you guys do, in fact, you can't conduct any business unless you adopt the rules. You can make any rule you want. There's another strange rule that says you can wear a bolo tie, or you can wear a necktie, or you have to wear a jacket. You could even pass a rule that everybody had to wear pink shoes. Kind of funny, but my point is that you could pass any rule that you want, and then the body would have to abide by it. Now, presumably, and we don't know this because there's no rules about an Article 5 convention, but the very first thing that would happen is you would have to pass the rules. Well, the very first convention did that too, and that's the only one that we've ever had. The very first thing they did is they changed the threshold of voting from it being unanimous to 3/4. So they could change how things are voted on. Senator Barlow says, well, it'll be one state, one vote. You don't know that because you can make the rules up as you go. Secondly, the first Constitutional Convention absolutely exceeded their authority. In the call for the convention, they had absolutely no authority whatsoever to write the Constitution. The only authority they had was to revise the Articles of Confederation, and even supporters of Convention of States absolutely agreed with that. This book, which if you were here 2 years ago, you were handed a copy of it, is written by Michael Capek. He's a state director for the Convention of States. In this book, he too admits that the first convention was a runaway convention and that they absolutely exceeded their authority. Last thing, and I've already kind of covered the runaway convention. Senator Barlow mentioned that there are 3 calls in this resolution. First of all, I would submit that those calls don't matter because an Article 5 convention can do whatever they want. But he said there's 3 of them. Fiscal restraints on the federal government. What the heck does that mean? It is not specific, and I have heard each and every one of you on the floor of the House say that we can't vote for this piece of legislation or that one because it's not specific enough or we don't know what it's doing. So why would you even accept that in this resolution? The second one, limit the power and jurisdiction of the government. We don't know what that means either. The last one, term limits, okay, that one's pretty specific, but we could make a very credible argument that we already have term limits. Final point I will make, my members of the committee, we do not have a problem with the Constitution. We have a problem with politicians. And if you vote for an Article 5 convention, you will still have a problem with politicians. And quite frankly, you'll be putting the people that created the problem in charge of the supposed solution. This is a dangerous idea, and I ask you to vote no. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Committee. My name is Marguerite Herman, and I'm here for the League of Women Voters of Wyoming. And we oppose this bill. We oppose Convention of States over the process. It's not that we are critical of the outcome that is desired by the author of this, but the sponsor. We don't have any argument with the intention of it, but we support changing the Constitution through the congressional route that we have used successfully over these centuries. And I'll just briefly tell you why. I'll try to be as brief as I can. As said before, there are no rules and guidelines in the U.S. Constitution on how a convention would work, which creates an opportunity that could rewrite any constitutional right or protection currently available to American citizens. An Article 5 convention is a threat to the U.S. Constitution, rights and liberties. There is no language in the Constitution to limit a convention to one issue. And there is reason to fear a convention, once called, will be able to consider any amendments to the Constitution that the delegates want to consider. There are no guidelines or rules to govern convention. Due to lack of provisions in the Constitution and lack of historical precedent, it is unknown how delegates to a convention would be picked, what rules would be in place, what would happen in the case of legal disputes, what issues would be raised, how the American people would be represented, and how to limit the influence of special interests in the convention. And because there's no way to limit a convention's focus, any constitutional issue could be brought up, and just a short list of things that the League is kind of fearful would be compromised. Civil rights, civil liberties, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, privacy rights, guarantee of equal protection, right to vote, immigration issues and the right to counsel and a jury trial, among others. Basic separation of executive, legislative, and judicial powers would be subject to revision as well. And just real briefly, there's a short list of things that the League would, if there were a convention, these would be the things that we would insist on to respond to some of our concerns I just mentioned. The League supports these safeguards for a constitutional convention. The convention must be transparent and not conducted in secret. Representation at the convention must be based on population rather than one state, one vote, and delegates should be elected rather than appointed. Voting at the convention must be by delegate, not by state. The convention must be limited to a specific topic. Only state resolutions on a single topic count when determining if a convention should be called, and the validity of state calls for an Article 5 constitutional convention should be determined by the most recent action of the state. And that just refers to some states have passed this and then rescinded it. And now that's not apply to us, but this is what we would be asking for the whole process. And so in short, those conditions are absent in this proposal, and without any kind of guarantees they would be present in any kind of prospective Article 5 convention. So therefore we oppose this bill, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other public testimony in opposition in the room? All right, we will go online then.
Mr. Chairman, you currently have two people online with their hands up, Tim Velder and Marty Halverson, and more coming on as we speak. So would you just like to start at the top, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's speak to Marty Halverson in opposition.
All righty. They're joining the room now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What a great subject for the Education Committee. I oppose Senate Joint Resolution 1, and I urge your no vote. The Constitution is not the problem, and a convention is not the solution. Other people have spoken about the technicalities of a convention. I would like to address the three calls. Impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. This is an admirable goal, but it is beyond naive to think that an amendment to the Constitution is going to restrain any administration with a currency printing press at its disposal. The Office of Management and Budget, House and Senate Budget Committees, House and Senate Ways and Means Committees, and other actors involved in this country's fiscal and budget policies are capable of such smoke and mirrors that any, quote, restraint imposed by the Constitution will become just another minor hurdle to work around. A recent example is President Obama claiming that Obamacare was paid for while hiding $750 million stolen from Medicare to pay for it. Crafty government officials and congressional staffers can spin a budget to fit any restraint a convention fantasizes it can impose. Witness former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen when they hit the debt limit under her tenure. We are taking extraordinary accounting steps to keep the government open. Extraordinary accounting steps, proof of smoke and mirrors. And do not doubt this. Any new attempt to fiscally restrain Washington, D.C. will be the excuse any administration needs to impose massive tax increases. Limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. The power of the federal government is already limited by Article 1, Section 8 of the original Constitution, plus the 9th and 10th Amendments. I can't imagine what amendment could be brought that is more explicit or include more limitations than those. As the federal government has for 200 years since Congress first proposed an unconstitutional transportation department, felt unlimited in its power and jurisdiction, aided and abetted by a complicit judiciary that finds the rights to privacy and dignity in our Constitution. No amendment could possibly overcome the congressional compulsion to act for the general welfare. Limit the terms of office. Mr. Chairman and committee, Senate Joint Resolution 5 this year calling for a constitutional amendment to impose term limits has already failed. I'm not going to repeat that testimony, but most of the employees of the federal government, and although that's all being worked on now, are the fourth branch of government. What amendment can possibly come out of a convention to address the fourth branch of government, which is our problem? So, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions you might have, but please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. We will, let's, next one. Is Eldon online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll bring Eldon Stahl into the room.
All right, we have about 3 minutes left for testimony in opposition.
Okay. You hear me?
We can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Eldon Stahl from Evanston, Wyoming, and I'm opposed to SJ1. This is yet another example of the masterful marketing of such resolutions. Same hook, different bait. This time we have the terribly, terribly dangerous hook, as U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman put it, of opening up the U.S. Constitution for surgery. But that hook is adorned with the Convention of States Project's proprietary blend of 3 tantalizing, ultra-conservative sounding, red meat subjects as bait. The marketers are quite adept at distracting you from the issue at hand, which is changing the U.S. Constitution. Why? Because when we asked them how and where the Founding Fathers messed up when they wrote the Constitution, and which parts specifically of that document gave us the problems our country faces, they must admit that, with very few exceptions, the Constitution is just fine, and that undermines their case. For example, let's say we simply ask how a federal government, which doesn't do well at all following the Constitution now, is going to follow a Constitution that has been changed. Well, first, some of the proponents from this group will claim that they're not trying to change the Constitution at all. Now, they're just trying to amend it, But I'm sure you as lawmakers who deal with amendments every day, you can see through this, I hope. Have you ever seen an amendment that changes absolutely nothing? That's just ridiculous. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, if proponents really don't know what amendments are, why should we treat seriously their resolution petitioning Congress to call a convention for proposing amendments to the U.S. Constitution? Now, if that doesn't work, they'll use what I call the Jedi mind trick, for lack of a better term, but they'll say something like, oh, the federal government actually does follow the Constitution quite well, but it's not the pocket Constitution. It's this 3,000-page book called the Constitution Annotated. Well, that's a classic red herring argument. One that on the surface appears relevant, but upon further inspection is not. Now, while distracting from the question at hand of changing the U.S. Constitution. Now, yes, the feds do give too much heed to this 3,000-page volume. But the solution to that problem, as presented in this resolution, is to change by amendment the pocket Constitution, not the 3,000-page book. So we're back to square one. We're shooting at the wrong target here. We still need to enforce and follow the pocket Constitution. This resolution is the wrong tool for the job, Mr. Chairman. So don't fall for this when they pull out that 3,000-page book. But in the end, if the argument for applying for a convention process for changing the U.S. Constitution were so compelling, proponents would not have to resort to such rhetorical gymnastics. So please remember.
A few moments to wrap up. I'd appreciate it. We're out of time.
Yeah, if you take the bait, you get the hook. So please vote no on SJ1, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, we will move on to testimony in support of the bill. Ms. Phillips, could you bring on Senator Santorum? I believe we'll let him go first. And then just a reminder, we have 20 minutes for testimony in support of the bill. So please be respectful of each other's time and try to take 2 to 3 minutes per speaker.
Mr. Chairman, at this moment, I do not see Senator Santorum logged into Zoom.
All right, well, we will go to the room, and if he comes back on, we'll go back there. All right, please fill the chairs. Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Julie Baker. I'm the State Director for Convention of States Action, and I live just outside of Hewlett. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on this very, very important process. I'd like to give some perspective on how much support there is in Wyoming for this resolution and ask you on behalf of these supporters to please vote yes on SJ1. But before I do, I thought it might be a timely time to address an important point that seems to get overlooked in this argument, if you like. The Constitution, as you know, was ratified with 7 articles. That's it. There were no Bill of Rights, no amendments to it. Article 5 was one of the 7 articles. It was pretty important to those folks who wrote it and unanimously voted to include the second part of Article 5. They intended that we use it. You will have been getting emails or phone calls asking for your support of Convention of States in general and SJ1 in particular. Some of you for years, and some of you only recently as freshmen. Constituents initially demonstrate their support for Convention of States by signing our petition. Because you normally only get supportive emails from your district, you might not realize that there are thousands of supporters of Convention of States across Wyoming, over 13,000. Wyoming has the second largest number of supporters in the country per capita, yet 19 other states have responded ahead of us. These constituents took the time to let you know that they're frustrated with Washington, D.C., squandering our resources and our money and dictating what we can and can't buy. It was inevitable that this was going to happen. It was expected. And that's why the state-initiated amendment proposal process was included in the Constitution in Article 5. Convention of States volunteers routinely engage with people and discuss with them how Article 5 can propose solutions to the problems that plague Washington, D.C. The overwhelming reaction is relief that there's a solution, and the framers gave us this most powerful, peaceful, legal, constitutional method to address judicial erosion of the Constitution, that the states can effectively push back in a meaningful and enduring way. The realization is followed by a stunned disbelief that Wyoming didn't lead the charge in this. All we're asking for is a meeting where those who attend, state legislators, debate topics and suggest solutions in the form of amendments. The amendments you suggest can be accepted or rejected by you. The state legislators control the entire process. Support is only growing for this. This is Wyoming's opportunity to put our stake in the ground. Finally join Florida and Texas and Wisconsin, Utah, Nebraska, and 14 other states to bring enduring structural reform. Please take into consideration the supporters in this room, those on Zoom, hundreds in your own districts, and the thousands across Wyoming, and vote yes on SJ1. And I'll take any questions and do my best if you have any.
Are there any questions? All right, I think we'll go back online. He has joined us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, he is joining the room now.
Got it.
Good afternoon.
I'm here at the state capitol, but not in Cheyenne. I'm in Des Moines. So I've got my Iowa flag in the background just to validate that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify here. And the best thing for me to do after going after the opposition is just to walk through very quickly some of the comments that were made with respect to this very important resolution. I'm here in Des Moines. I've been to Cheyenne many times because I know that the answer to the problems facing Washington are not found in Washington. The founders put you folks at the top of the food chain in this Constitution. And for a long time, you actually ruled Washington, D.C. After the 17th Amendment, when you gave up the right to appoint United States senators, that changed. People say, don't mess with the Constitution, that this thing is perfect. Well, it's been changed, not just changed by constitutional amendment, but it's been changed by court decisions. Yes, that 2,600-page document is the Constitution we live by. And the way you change that 2,600-page document is to change the underlying amendments to underlying text of the Constitution. You can't change it other than through court decisions otherwise. And so it's important to understand that you have the power to actually shape the future of the country. And in fact, the founders wanted you to do it. They gave you this power, and they were not the least bit concerned about a runaway convention. Why? Because conventions that require 3/4 of the states to ratify anything that comes from the convention is inherently is the hardest thing to do in this country. There's no governing body that has a 3/4 majority necessary. I even challenge Wyoming, which has a super duper majority of one party. How many bills would pass in the Wyoming legislature that 3/4 of the members had to vote in favor of it? The reality is it's hard because it should be hard. What's not hard is for, unfortunately, the left in America to change the Constitution by constitutional amendment through Supreme Court edict. That's what's been happening. The left has no desire to have a convention of states. They don't get their amendments in the Constitution from the bottom up. They do it from the top down. They're not going to take over anything. They don't want to take over, and they don't need to take over anything. A runaway convention is simply a myth. And they also say that, well, Congress doesn't pay attention to the Constitution as it's drafted. The reality is, if you look at the amendments, there have been 17 since the founding. Every single one of them is adhered to. There's only 2 terms for a president. Senators are not appointed by the legislature anymore. There's an income tax in this country. You go on down the list. They're all adhered to, and frankly, they're all adhered to faithfully. The reality is that if you need, as you do, to pass a constitutional amendment, If you have 34 states gather to call for a convention, 50 states gather, 26 of them propose amendment, and then 3/4 adopt it, you've got a consensus in America. And no court, no Congress is going to buck that consensus, and they never have in the history of our country when it came to a constitutional amendment. The idea that this is something that's dangerous is a creation of the left that unfortunately some of our side have decided to adopt. It's not real. The reality is that this is something that is necessary. I always use the illusion that the country is on fire. If anybody doesn't believe that we're facing a fiscal crisis with almost $37 trillion in debt, when I left Congress, it was 6, and now it's 37. If you don't, please raise your hand if you don't think we're headed to a fiscal collapse. Raise your hand if you don't think that there's a tyranny occurring in Washington and grabbing power away from the people in the states. In a simple word, the house is on fire, and you folks are standing across the street looking at a house on fire, and you're worried that a car may come across and hit you on the way to put the fire out. Don't worry about a car that may or may not come across the street when you know for sure that the problem is real and this country needs your help. So I encourage you to pass the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Santorum for being here today. In your opinion, so Wyoming is a special state. It is the least populated state, and in this system, a proposed system for a convention of states, would you agree that this elevates Wyoming's voice in a disproportionate way to other states?
No question about it. It's the only forum that you will have where all decisions are being made. You have a Senate, obviously, which Wyoming has, quote, disproportionate representation, but anything that comes through the Senate has to pass the House, which has proportional representation. This convention of states is simply one state, one vote at every step in the process. The 34 states that are to call the convention, each state gets one vote on doing that. At the convention, 26 states, each state gets one vote. And at confirming and ratifying, 38 states, each state gets one vote. There is no better forum for the state of Wyoming to see its issues being raised than in this forum. And people say, well, we don't know that it'll be one state, one vote. And the answer to that is, yes, we do. And the reality is that prior to 1776, all the states' meetings were held by a convention of states because we didn't have a central government. So there were literally dozens of conventions of states. And by the way, every single one of them was one state, one vote. The convention called in Annapolis in 1786, one state, one vote. The one that was at Annapolis called for a broader convention that was held in Philadelphia in 1787, one state, one vote. Since the Constitutional Convention in 1787, there have been almost 20 regional conventions of states called by the different states. The Colorado River Compact was decided by a convention of states. California got one vote, Colorado got one vote, Utah got one vote, etc. They've always been. And so you say, well, what does that mean? What it means is that I'm in Iowa. Iowa, when they convene, they have no rules. Well, how do they know what to do? Precedent. Precedent is how it's governed. Almost every body in the country starts their session like Congress. They have to vote for a speaker first. Is there a rule that says it? No, but there's precedent that says it. And that's how you start. Now, will California and New York try to change it to make it proportional representation, proportional voting? Of course they could try, but there are 3 times more small states than there's big states. By the way, they tried at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. They were voted down, and they'd be voted down again. And that's why Wyoming is king at this convention.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the testimony.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman, committee members. My name is Jordan Tilley. I live in Glen Rock, Wyoming. I've grown up in Wyoming my whole life, born and raised. And I became passionate about convention of states a few years ago. I testified here when we were all under kind of COVID lockdown. And one thing that I think you guys probably know best is that fear tends to rise, especially during legislative session. We get it in the mail, we see it on ads, Facebook, and that's one thing that is really powerful. There's been great bills that you guys have put out, and I've seen a lot of fear that has come after those. And that's one thing that when you're talking with people about the Convention of States, people in opposition show a lot of fear, towards that. And there have been 11,000 proposals for amendments to the Constitution. We have 27. So that means it's 0.2% chance of a amendment or a proposal actually becoming ratified and going through the process. So I feel that the states should take their chance at having that proposal, getting together and having a meeting. And I think a lot of fear comes from misunderstanding that there's no power in the convention itself. It's the states getting together and proposing ideas of how we could fix some of these problems. I actually went to Texas last fall and was part of a simulated convention of states. And so we had people from all over the country come. I do not remember exactly how many representative states there were. I want to say it was 40 plus of people coming from different states. And so we ran through a simulation of what a convention of states would look like. And one of my favorite parts was these are regular people, just as you guys are, as you head back home after legislative session is over. You don't stay here in Cheyenne. You go back to your farms, to your jobs, to your family. And that's what it would look like at a convention of states if it were to be called, where it is the state legislators going that are closer to the people, that really know how some of these federal bureaucracies overreach and overstep and really cause harm to the states. In Washington, they may not see that because they live there year round. They might not ever come back, as we've seen with some of our representatives that didn't even live here. And that's who's representing us in Washington. So they don't see the effects of some of these things that we could fix with amendments to the Constitution. So that was one of my favorite parts. And I know that you guys still believe in the process and the system and the Constitution, otherwise you wouldn't be here serving us as you guys do. You're not getting rich doing it, So I know you guys believe in the system, so I think we take our shot, join the call for convention, and get together and propose some ideas. Because there were really, that was my second favorite part, was some of the proposals that came up at the simulated conference or convention. Some ideas that you had, somebody might have a little different take on it. And it just kind of sparked activity of, well, this is what our state sees and this is how we've responded, and different ideas, just brainstorming. It was really neat to see. And I know that if we were to call a convention of states, that we would see that same type of brainstorming and collective success. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Dooley, and I took time off work to come down here from Casper. I represent myself. I agree with what Rick Santorum said, what's been said so far, and I see the biggest problem is people confuse a convention of states to propose amendments as to automatically changing the Constitution. It doesn't happen that way. You guys wouldn't put up with that if we got together, 800 of us, and said, we're going to take away the Second Amendment. Would you guys go with that? No. Neither will anybody else. It's to propose amendments. The states have the final say-so, one way or another. You see all that about California and New York going to take over. You guys won't allow that. When you put them there as one state, one vote, that's what you're going to allow. I assume that's what you're going to allow. When it comes to the problems, they said, what amendment would do that? Well, one of the amendment is the Constitution now is litigated to this monstrosity as we talked about. They need to maybe, like say, talked about those, if you're going to litigate it, it's going to be approved, it needs to then be voted on by the states. I'm just spitballing here, I'm not a member of this, but there's many ways to cover all of those issues. The people that say there is no way aren't looking for a way. It's kind of like when Washington, D.C. said, I see no evidence of this. Well, that's because they're not looking. As soon as you start looking, you find ways. You get all of these people together, you come with ideas. People are smart. A lot of politicians in Washington think we're not. People are. And when you get them together, we come up with good ideas. And this whole thing here, it literally is just to get us together to propose amendments to help control the federal government. They go in there as middle-class people and come out multimillionaires. pretty sure none of you will come out of the Wyoming legislature multimillionaires. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. There's just all sorts of things that are problems in Washington that need to be looked at and fixed by the states, because Washington isn't going to cut off its own gravy train. And that's what I have. I ask you to vote yes this through, and I ask if there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none? Anyone else would like to testify? We have a few more minutes. Please fill the chairs. Three more minutes. Mr. Moline?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this. These are important issues. These are issues that have been important for a long time, and I think it takes an important decision to work on these issues, and I think this is a mechanism that will work. I think we have the safeguards in there, that it won't be a runaway, and we appreciate, coming from Wyoming, that it will be the one state, one vote. Trying to be brief, but lending my support to this would take any questions you or the committee may have.
Questions? Seeing none? Is there any further public testimony? Please come forward. If you'd like to testify to the chair, we have 2 minutes left, and we're doing testimony in support of the bill. Please go ahead. Just state your name and where you're from.
Okay. My name's John Ruth. I'm from Cheyenne, Wyoming, originally Littleton, Colorado. I'm a veteran, and I don't really get into politics much, but on behalf of we the people and humanity in general, the government is out of control. The power needs to be brought back to the people. The Constitution needs to be reread, not written. Annotations or whatever amendments that have been made for individual causes doesn't address our founding fathers' Constitution that addressed the whole, in my opinions. And I think that it's time that our government start doing what's best for all concerned. And our, not this government, but as you can see throughout the world, there's a big push from, what do you call them, non-government organizations trying to overrun the world for a one world government. And we have a lot of our politicians in DC that support that. That needs to end. We were United States of America. We're not America of the world. We're to be governed by ourselves as a whole. And I'd just like to pass that on for whatever good it might do. And I hope that the Convention of States, I don't know everything about it, but it sounds to me like a good plan, a peaceful plan, as opposed to what it could be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, we'll now close public testimony, but I'll give Representative Brady a few minutes to say what you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here representing myself. I'm sure you've heard from me for several years in a row now, and I believe in the Constitution. I believe in we the people, and I look forward to some good debate on the floor, and would like to ask your support of Convention of States. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Kelly, seconded by Representative Singh. Are there any amendments to the bill? I didn't think so. Is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, not going to take too long here, and I don't feel the need to explain many votes, but this is a big one and many people are paying attention. Personally, I am not convinced this is the way to go or should be done. That said, many states have spoken up. This is being argued in all corners of Wyoming. And only a handful of counties are represented here on the Education Committee. There are 9 members and 2 of us are from the same county. I think it would be responsible to act with some humility and send this to the full House so all corners of the state can have their say on this issue, and I will be voting yes.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was one of the first big bills that I got really involved with in the previous term in the 67th legislature, and it was an honor to carry this idea of a convention of states on the floor last time. I think that of the systems out there to talk about a proposed change to the Constitution, this is the one the one avenue in which Wyoming's voice is disproportionately strong. In a system where there is one state, one vote, Wyoming's vote is 67.6 times stronger than California's. This amendment process is slanted in favor of rural states specifically. And so I think there are comprehensive guidelines to how we get to the threshold of states that are required to have the conversation in the first place. But the system that's being proposed, it does fight for Wyoming. In the smaller states do have a stronger voice, which is recognized. And I think that the implementation of the 17th Amendment took a lot of the voice of the legislature away from how we do things in government. That was a built-in check, a check and balance between the state governments and the federal government. And so I think this is, by passing this resolution, we go in the step of recognizing federalism as an essential component of our government. And so I will be an aye vote.
Further, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to everyone that's here today, and thank you to what we just heard. I would agree and add on that this is a big vote, and it certainly is a big vote for Wyoming in our standing in this nation and for all the reasons that we've heard already today. And I feel a responsibility to vote yes on this because it is very pressing, really, when you think about where we are as a nation and where we're headed as a nation. And I'm very thankful that it's constitutional. I'll be an aye vote.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, we are voting on Senate Joint Resolution 1. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on Senate Joint Resolution 1, Convention of States do pass. Representative Bratton has left an absentee vote of no. Representative Erickson has left an absentee vote of aye. Representative Gudenmas has left an absentee vote of no. Representative Kelly.
Aye.
Representative Lawley has left an absentee vote of aye. Representative Singh.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
No.
Representative Williams.
Aye.
Chairman Andrew.
Aye.
6 aye, 3 no.
The bill is passed the committee. We are now adjourned. Thank you.